product of human hands. And if that's the case, hey Bob, nice to see you. And
Hi.
and if that's the case, that means everything that happened, every proof text that was just created, every argument that using the Bible or the Torah as its rationale for it, that's the house of cards, because now you're basing it on something which is flimsy because the
Right.
Reformed Jew says it's not from God. Now again, but the Orthodox Jew is perfectly fine. That's why, and that is essentially why is it that we can just choose what we want to do? Why is it that some Reformed Jews choose to keep kosher, some don't choose to keep kosher? It's right because we know that there's no penalty, right? It's not like we're not being penalized if you eat a ham sandwich or drive on Shabbos or what. There's no penalty involved. The only penalty is, you between you and you,
Right.
or maybe you and your
You're not the
mom.
person you
Right.
should be.
No, right? You know what I mean? It's like, but the Orthodox would say, no, there is a penalty. God is monitoring all this. And now you would say, well, what about all the stuff, like, but God didn't write the Talmud. That's humans, and no one argues that.
Right.
But what they would say is
So
that
he stopped after 5 books? Did he get tired?
right. Well, what they would say is, to take
Yeah,
that
it goes right
to take that
back
to
to
the
that.
next step, what they would say is not exactly. It's because we just unpacked the secrets that God was, God laid out the breadcrumbs for us to be able to pick them up and then create these documents. So they are God's word that's been kind of, but thankfully between the rabbis and Akiva and Gamliel and Yoshua and Eliezer, they all kind of together put it together and said, this is what God meant when God said this. Because we know that, God certainly has an opinion about whether we check our email or not on Shabbat, right? But we also know with certainty that email is not expressly written about in the Torah. And so therefore, what we need to do is, but God knew that there would be email, and so therefore what we need to do is just figure out what God was thinking.
Now, how come is like lighting, turning a light switch on, does that
Spark,
come from?
spark, a spark which creates a fire, and a fire is illegal in Shabbos or
Okay.
Shabbat. But going back to the original part was, but it all works perfectly if you're Orthodox, right?
Right.
Again, I'm not trying. This isn't me disparaging. It's me just saying that it's not a house of cards for the Orthodox. So we benefit. Reformed Jews, we need the Orthodox, because without the Orthodox, I mean, this is, by the way, an essential thing about Judaism. Reform is all fine and good, and I truly believe in it, but minus Orthodoxy, we're nothing. Because Reform is pushing up against something and saying, no, 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 no. But without the thing to push up against, what are we, right? And so it's like, so Orthodoxy is, and so, my objections to Orthodoxy are always based upon what I think are modern human issues, right? It's like, so for example, I object to Orthodoxy because they don't see women and men as equal, right?
Were you raised Reform?
Reform.
Isn't that how Reform Judaism began, as modernization? In the
Absolutely.
modern world.
Absolutely. In fact, my professor from seminary, Hebrew College, my history professor named Michael Meyer, who was truly one of the great scholars, he said, he says his book, which is the absolute, the essence of the Bible of the history of Reform Judaism, it's titled, and it's a perfect title, A Response to Modernity.
I think you had me read that book a couple of years, several years ago.
Oh my God! If it's like, how do you read that? That book is about as dense can be. It was like, it was miserable reading.
Maybe
But-
it's a different book. I'll look tonight on my book.
Yeah, response to modernity,
I'll read
and
it.
it's like I do not encourage, like, I didn't, by the way, it was only, I think if Mark says that I recommended it, it was only because he like begged me for what's the
Well, you
definitive
gave
thing,
me some
because I
book to
would
read.
never have told him to read this unless he was said, I'm struggling with insomnia, then I've been like, well, take this. I mean, it could not be more of a dense book. It's like, it's utterly unreadable.
Well, you gave me some book that I read. so
Utterly
I'll
unreadable.
figure
It is
out how-
misery. But at the same time, look, but it's the seminal work on this on Reform Judaism, which is, but he titles it, that my point is, he titles it a response to modernity. In other words, the world keeps modernizing, and are we gonna modernize with it, or are we just gonna stay back where we've been for the last however many thousands of years? Anyway, Gene, Bob, good to see you. We are going to study today the first Mishnah from Pirkei Avot, chapter 5, and then we are going to go on to another sage. This is, so let's talk about, so does everyone have chapter 5? If you don't, I have a copy of it here for everybody. Okay, good. So do you guys have that chapter 5 there too? Good. So chapter 5 is thoroughly different than what we've seen up to this point in terms of the Mishnahs, because whereas up till now it would say this rabbi said, Rabbi Eliezer said, don't do this, do that instead, or you get the point. Now, in all of chapter 5, I think there's one or two times in which they ascribe it to somebody, and so therefore every other one is without an author at least written there. Our tradition claims that all of these, when they're not specifically ascribed to a single sage, they say it's Rabbi Meir, but who knows if that's correct or not. And we've studied Meir a fair amount.
Yeah.
He's one of the greats. There's no question about it. Now, so what Pirkei Avot does here is it starts to kind of get into very fun Pirkei Avot language, which is, 10 things happened here, 5 things happened there, 3 things happened there, 7 things, it's like they kind of start playing with numbers or whatever. And so it's just a different style. And that's why, as I said, I'm just kind of bringing up random sages that have nothing to do with these specific ones, but just so we can study a sage, because I've liked that method of doing it. And so we're going to do 5.1, and then we're going to do we're going to study Rabbi Oshaya and actually his father Rabbi Chama too. That will be after this. And the reason why I say that'll be after this is because, believe it or not, it's not always going to be like this. Oftentimes it's going to be much, much, much more clear. I mean, Pirkei Avot is famous for being really clear and extremely readable, right? It's like up until now, I mean, there's sometimes it's been a little confusing, but still you were able to yourself, kind of glean what the message is of all of them, which is very much unlike our Jewish texts, in which it's constantly this big mystery that we're kind of unpacking what on earth it means. But like the Pirkei Avot is, generally speaking, it's pretty clear and straightforward, and that's one of the beauties of it. And it will continue to be, with the exception of the one that we're doing today. I mean, I can tell you, like, I brought this book with me because this is generally my first book that I look to when I am studying these texts. I just love this because I love the person who wrote this. I have a lot of respect for him. His name is Yitz Greenberg. Wait, does he write it? Or no, maybe it was another one. Anyway, the point is, you'll see that it's not this one, but so many other ones, they say, we're not exactly sure what he's doing here. But in any event, so let's read it, and I'll give you a chance to give your interpretation of it, because I don't really understand it. But like the beginning, it's like you can understand bits and pieces of it, but then, or you can understand them separately from what they're, you know what I mean? For each sentence you understand without understanding the whole. But so it starts off with 10 utterances the world was created. So what does that mean? Well, I wrote them down here just for, the world was created with the utterance, God said, let there be light. 1. God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters. 2. God said, so 10 things God said. Let there be this, let there be that, let there be this, let there be that. And clearly, okay, so then let's keep reading. And what does this teach? For surely it could have been created with 1 utterance. God could have said, let there be a world with all that stuff in it, right? But instead, God goes and has 10 utterances with amongst 6 days or whatever, and what it's saying is, why did it need to be 10? Why couldn't it have just been 1? But this was so in order to punish the wicked who destroy the world that was created with 10 utterances, and to give a good reward to the righteous who maintain the world that was created with 10 utterances. So again, if we split up this and ended it with why couldn't it have been created with 1 utterance and let that be its own part, and then we took the next few sentences and separated that and maybe kind of imagined what could have been preceding that, like something to the effect of, because this was so in order to punish the wicked who destroy the world, something like, why did God say, make these utterances in such an angry way? Or, I'm not exactly sure, or it's very unclear, and no one really knows. And I mean, I could read to you what my Rabbi Yitzhak Greenberg has to say about it, and it's going to be very unsatisfying, to be sure. What I can say is, in the various things that I have read, I can kind of unpack a little bit. But as I unpack a little bit, I'd be delighted for your opinions.
So I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question to you. Why does there always have to be a why?
You're right. Good point.
Why did we pick this subject to study tonight? Tonight was a good night.
Because right, but no, I agree. Except the question. The question I'm asking is, I don't see the connection.
No, why did he ask the question? I mean, God made 10 utterances instead of 1 or 12 or 152.
Oh, right.
Why?
Because God wanted to, right? It's like, I agree, but that part I'm agreeing with you fully. My question is, what does that have to do with, 10 utterances versus 1 utterance? And then what does that have to do with in order to punish the wicked? That's the part, that's the issue that's at play here.
They're really not connected.
They're not connected. I mean, it's like, if you kept the first 2 sentences alone, you'd say, all right, 10, 1, because God wanted to.
Right.
And now but in order to push the wicked, 2 people, all in this, in 1 second.
How does that punish?
Why are there
the
2 people? They're not just 1.
Right, no, but my point is, why did 2 people join at the very same second, 12 minutes late?
But like Arthur said, if it's God did it, then there's a reason.
Right, no, that we're not. So again,
Whether we know it or not, there is a reason.
Right.
Oh,
Our job is to figure it out.
I'm in agreement with you about this. I do not have a problem with why 10, why not 1. I think that is there's various different reasons why I did 10. In fact, I mean, some of these, it might be relevant. So let me tell you what I kind of gleaned a little bit was, 10 is the symbol of completion, right? So, 10 plagues, 10 commandments. It's like 10 is not nothing, and now they're saying 10 utterances. Okay, so and I also was reading about how, and God was careful with and precise with the creating the world, and that's why it was with 10. It was essentially intentional and very and thoughtful. And I guess maybe what the implication is And shouldn't we be careful and thoughtful, therefore, if God was so careful and thoughtful with the creation of the world, is it not on us also to be careful and thoughtful? And that kind of leaks a little bit into what this, the second half of this is, in order to punish the wicked who destroy the world that was created with 10 utterances. Like, why did God do it with 10? To punish them. Still don't get it because they aren't careful with the world. Maybe I'm again. I told you that I'm going to be grasping at straws here. I do not know.
I tell you that I mean, I couldn't figure this out at all when I read it this afternoon. But that gives me a framework to say, yeah. I mean, maybe he was laying the pattern for saying, okay, look, I took my time and was careful. I expect you to be
to the same thing.
The same thing.
I love it, except I still don't get why it's punishing. So I really like. Okay, so let me read what Yitz Greenberg has to say about it, even though it's not going to be helpful either. He says, the number 10 signifies complete, total, or perfect situations. Okay, I think that's why I got that. The ultimate punishment that finally broke the tyrannical Pharaoh was 10 plagues. The ultimate process of God's instructions for a good life was the 10 commandments given at Mount Sinai. 10 sayings of creation means that God spoke the maximum number of times to do a complete job. The image created by this metaphor is one of the infinite Almighty laboring mightily to bring creation into being. It takes tremendous energy, substance, and organization. Okay, I think we all kind of got that. Now, this is what he writes about wicked and righteous. The world is so complex, so exact in its perfection that it needs a total effort by human beings to uphold, continue, and improve it. Those who destroy life and damage the world are committing terrible sins because they degrade a creation that took infinite divine power to establish. Those who uphold and improve the world are doing an eternally great thing because they are partnering with God in sustaining creation. That's beautiful. And I like it. And it's kind of similar to what we were just talking about. And yet I still don't get it, what the connection is, right? I'm still struggling with seeing why. It's like, because it's clearly saying we needed 10 utterances, not one. It was important because we needed 10 and not one, because by doing 10, that punishes the wicked.
Well, house down.
And I still don't get it. Yeah.
If it wasn't so precise, then, if you did something against the animals that God created, but it wasn't specified and God created the animals, that was it, it may be giving specific things that you can sin against one for one, and it's more like an explanation.
So are you suggesting, which actually is kind of interesting to me, that there's now it's the wicked. So in order to be very clear about the things that the wicked, that the righteous should make sure to be caring about, and the wicked too. If you have just the wicked with 10, if it just said God created the world, then the wicked might say, this is actually kind of making a little sense to me, that the wicked might say oh, well, yeah, created the world, but that doesn't mean I have to take care of the waters, world.
So maybe we should read the 10 utterances.
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, let's see. One of them is let there be an expanse.
Rabbi, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, but
I'm sorry.
But I'll try.
I came on late, and so I just was wondering where we are.
Okay, we're reading Avot 5:1, and we are doing so in a very complicated fashion because I'm struggling, but I think Laura's insight is the best yet. Best I've heard yet. And that is that it's kind of being explicit. It's being explicit. 10 utterances versus 1 communicates being explicit about things. And so you can't say, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that law. I didn't know that was important. I didn't know that God created that. I thought that just God created the world, and then that kind of happened naturally. That wasn't God's work, So if another one, let earth sprout vegetation. So, so that means plants are God's plants. And so a person might say, I'm going to chop down this tree and, and not think that that is
destroying something that
God made.
specifically.
Right. I think it's a great insight. I think that's the best one I've read I was so struggling with this, and did not see anything as close to as good as that. So
It's
Laura,
like laying
congratulations.
down a model of, I'm thinking in terms of a written outline, so that there's something to refer back to.
It's a handbook, right? It's a handbook.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's not, and when you say, I'm kind of thinking about, it doesn't matter. It's like, but when you are just open with it and vague about it, which is, all this is thanks to, if that's it, if, this whole temple is thanks to Ari Goldstein, right? Then it's like, okay, but if he got that, he built that, he did that, and then suddenly these things become a little bit more specific, and then you are now connecting them more.
Not only specific, but significant.
Right. Yeah. Bravo. It's a great insight, Laura, because I want to publish it. I'll give you credit for it.
But how does that punish the wicked?
Because now right. Well, so they have plausible deniability. So if one of them is let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, birds that fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky. So that means if you can't say you thought just for fun shooting a bird would be is just fun, and now it's explicit. If you shoot that bird, you're going against the word of God. Now, by the way, this is just what this Avot passage says, and it's an ethical passage. It's not necessarily a law or and we are, and again, this is a great read in my opinion, but it's not necessarily the read, but it could be. And so what I don't want you to hear me come out saying is that anyone who chops down a tree or shoots a bird is necessarily is going to be judged by God negatively. No, I don't believe that. But then again, of course I don't believe that. But because going back to our Reform Judaism conversation, of course I don't believe that. But still, at the same time, what it does is it kind of tries to maybe holds people accountable. And the flip side is those who function and treat all of creation with honor and respect and love. It's kind of like a little love letter that you're sending to God, and God's hearing it, which I'm touched by. I really am. I am touched by it. So let's move. Go ahead.
It gives people kind of a measuring stick, if you will, to measure their behavior against other people's behavior.
Yeah, I think
How
so.
well are we following the 10 utterances?
Yeah. But it's not following the 10 utterances. It's not like the 10 commandments. It's kind of more like 10 things, 10 utterances were communicated by God, and therefore we have to acknowledge that because God said these 10 things, they take on a higher level of
recognize them
as almost divine and not commandments.
Right. It's the first birthday.
Right. No, it reminds me. Look, I've been watching this show. I just finished this TV show, and by the way, if you haven't seen it, it's fabulous. It's called Severance. Seen Severance yet? It's on Apple TV. Oh my God, it's phenomenal. But the point is that I don't want to say too much because I really encourage you. But they have there's this. They have almost like a Bible that is created, that this company creates, like this Bible almost, and it's like everything that this one person said almost becomes biblical, and it almost becomes like standard, and so and it's just, so this guy said it, so it's like, oh, it makes it so much more special because he said it. Anyway, by the way, it's like this TV show called Severance is like dystopian a little bit. It's not like a horror. It's not, but it is there's tension to it. But the acting is extraordinary. Two of the actors in it. One is Christopher Walken. One is John Turturro. I can't. 2 seasons. I cannot recommend this TV show enough. Anyway, yeah. I watched the first part on the plane going over to Israel, and then I watched the remainder of the first season on the plane coming back, and then I was like, oh my God, I gotta watch. And then I had to watch the whole second season like in 2 days. Anyway, so here we are, Rabbi Oshaya. He also goes by Hoshaya from time to time, and I only gave him the title of this, even though we're also kind of talking about his father Hama in it as well, because Oshaya certainly is of those two, the great. In fact, Oshaya has been labeled with a moniker of Oshaya the Great.
Do you have that one?
Yeah. Now, Oshaya, all right, so let's read the first. I'm going to read the first one to you, and the first one is. Just read the first one to you, and then from there we're gonna. This really doesn't have anything to do with the chronology of him, but I just wanted to start with this. Rabbi Yochanan. Now, this is not Yochanan ben Zakkai, the one who said, "Give me Yavna and its sages," that early kind of like luminary, but rather this is a next generation Yochanan who is also one of the great greats, but he is part of like that, but he is part of the early generation of post Mishnah Tanaitic rabbis. He lived in Israel, and he's one of the greats, and we'll be studying him later. But so just suffice it to say, the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says this about him means a great deal. Rabbi Yochanan said about his teacher, Rabbi Oshaya the Distinguished, who was also called Oshaya the Great. So Rabbi Oshaya the Distinguished was as great in his generation as Rabbi Meir was in his generation. Just as with regard to Rabbi Meir, in his generation, his colleagues were unable to fully grasp the profundity of his thinking due to the subtlety of his great mind. So it was with Rabbi Oshaya. His colleagues were unable to fully grasp the profundity of his thinking. Now, so what Yochanan is doing in Yochanan, it's like that's a pretty good reference on the back cover of the book that you just wrote. What Yochanan is doing is he's comparing Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Oshaya, which is a pretty impressive comparison. Now, why is it though that Rabbi Meir is is on Mount Rushmore and Oshaya is not on Mount Rushmore? It's probably because of the time that Rabbi Oshaya lived. And that is, he lived between and the Amoraim. Right between. They kind of call him an Amorah, which meaning, but he's really early. So he's not really part of that conversation, and he's post the Tanah period. And so therefore it's just interesting because he's kind of like a man without a country, a man without a time period. Again, so Yochanan was his student, and Yochanan, at least in Israel, would be kind of that first generation, that early generation of Amoraim in Israel. So, but he's not, right? And meanwhile, his, So the point is that his teachers were, the last generation of Tanaim, but he missed it, right? So it's just kind of interesting that's probably why he got kind of lost in all this. Probably had he just been born 30 years earlier or 30 years later, he would have been.
But you mentioned that he's considered great.
Because they write about him that way.
it's not because you've read something that he wrote, it's because of what others say about him.
Yes, but he has tons of stuff in the Talmud.
He
But it's
does.
just not as much narrative stuff. It's just kind of, it's more legal stuff. And he
So
is,
his stuff was included.
oh, yeah, totally included.
Yeah.
Totally included. But I'm just saying, why is he not part of like, why don't you, whereas you might hear me or others say Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Ditta, but you never really hear Oshai very much, and it's probably because he got lost in that. So, so the first thing is the question of, and I put this in, and it's about his father, whose name is Rabbi Chama. And the reason why I put this in is because it speaks to kind of a truth that we're going to see a little bit later. I think it's a relatively important thing which comes out of this. So this comes from the tractate called Nida. Nida has to do with purity after a woman's period. But again, just because, and you'll see why. You'll see why. But okay, the Gemara relates. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, we know him, of course. He was the redactor of the Mishnah. So he was essentially the last generation of the Tanaim. Tanaim. Would praise Rabbi Chama bar Bissa to Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi, by saying that he is a great man. Now, notice it does not say that he is a great scholar. I just want to point that out, but that he's a great man. Rabbi Ishmael said to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, when he comes to you, bring him to me. Okay, so let me just, by the way, give you a little bit of family tree and chronology here. So Chama and Yehuda Hanasi and Ishmael are roughly the same age. Judah Hanasi, Rabbi Judah Hanasi, he was a student of Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi also is Rabbi Ishmael's father. I know this is a little confusing.
We've studied Yossi, but not Ishmael.
Right,
Okay.
right. Now, so my point is I guess what I'm trying to say is that the three characters in this first paragraph are all roughly the same age generation, even though Judah Hanasi is by far the most celebrated. He is everything. Ishmael is a scholar in his own right, to be sure. Chama, a rabbi, but not one of the luminaries. And Yossi is their teacher. So anyway, remember, so Ishmael says, okay, fine, when he comes, let me see how great of a man he is. So when Chama came before him, Rabbi Ishmael said to him, ask me about a halachic matter. Okay? So he's not testing Chama. He's simply saying, I want to get to know you a little bit better. Ask me something. Rabbi Chama asked him, if a woman examined herself with a cloth that was not examined by her before its use, and she placed it in a box, and on the following day she found blood on the cloth, what is the halakha? So just, again, this is why this is in the tractate of purity and menstruation, but he's basically just saying if a woman is checking to see if she still has blood from her period, and she looks at the cloth that she was using, but she never looked at it before to see if that was old blood or new blood, what's the law, right? So Rabbi Ishmael said to him, shall I say to you an answer in accordance with the statement of father, my father? Or shall I say to you an answer in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? Which would you prefer? So he's saying, I can tell you that my father and Judah Hanasi have two different opinions about this. And I can tell you both. So which one do you want? Right? And this was the test.
This is where is it better to be a father or a teacher comes in?
Rabbi Chama said to him, say to me an answer in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So what Chama said was, tell me about what Judah Hanasi, the great, he is, right? Okay, so let's just stop there. And not what your father, no, Yossi, Rabbi, this is complicated. No, you're fine. It's like, so tell me what Judah Hanasi had to say about it and not what your father had to say about it. Okay? Rabbi Yishmael said, is this the one that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says about him, that he is a great man? How can he neglect the statement of the teacher, Rabbi Yossi, and listen to the statement of the student, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? In other words, it's not just that you were more interested in hearing the student, because remember, my father is his teacher. So he's the source. So why wouldn't you want to hear it from, right? But he's more interested in hearing it from Judah Hanasi, who is probably his teacher to some degree also. In other words, he just showed preference to Judah Hanasi over Rabbi Yossi. Now, what does that mean? Unclear, but what the text is trying to say is that, for some people, you're learning from your parents is the best way to do it. From others, learning from your teacher. And clearly what they were trying to communicate here was that Hama was more interested in learning not from his father, but rather from his teacher. And this is important because Hama also has a father who's a rabbi. So it's 3 generations. His father's name is Rabbi Bisa, which we'll meet in a minute. Okay, so
It's kind of like today's, would you prefer, book learning or street smarts? You're going to get street smarts from your family. You're
Yes.
going to get book learning
From your teacher.
teachers.
yes, it's exactly correct.
Yeah.
Although I agree completely with that analogy, but I would only say that it's not like that the family can give you the book learning too. And the question was, which do you trust them to give you the best book learning or not?
Right. Well, okay.
But it could also, by the way, be, which I happen to think, just because I've been reading about this, and you might get this sense too from maybe the next one, which is that, again, if Hama is, let's call him just a middleweight scholar,
Okay.
right? He is a scholar, he knows what he's doing, but he's not publishing any books, right? And no one's referencing much in his name or anything like that. And so maybe it's more of a guy who is trying to suck up to the big shot.
Mhm.
And it's like, it's a whole lot, it's like he wants Judah Hanasi to like him. And so therefore he continues to kind of be to suck up to him. This next story is extraordinary. I love this next story. And this will kind of help bring together a lot of it. And we're going to take it slow because I love this story. Rabbi Chama bar Bissa, this is the father, went and sat for 12 years in the study hall. So he left home, kind of like what Rabbi Akiva did. In fact, exactly like what Rabbi Akiva did. Left home for 12 years, never came home. When he came back to his house, he said, I will not do what the son of Hachinai, who came home suddenly with tragic consequences for his wife, did. So what that is, it's a reference to literally like just a previous paragraph that talks about this guy Hachinai, who also studied for 12 years, came home, nobody recognized him, nobody knew, and then he came into his house and his wife saw him and she thought he was a ghost and and then dropped dead.
Hard.
had a heart attack, right? And so when he says, I'm not doing what Achi and I did, I'm going to give her warning that I'm coming because I don't want her dropping dead when she sees me. So he said, so he went and sat in the study hall in his hometown and sent a message to his house that he had arrived. And by the way, note that, no, again, it doesn't say, it doesn't have to say it, but I am aware that it doesn't say that anyone recognized him, anyone kind of, at least not yet. While he was sitting there, his son, Rabbi Oshaya, whom he did not recognize, came and sat before him. And why didn't he recognize him? Because if Oshaya was 18 at this moment, that means he left him when he was 6.
Yeah.
So neither Oshaya recognized him, nor did he recognize Oshaya. Came and sat before him. Rabbi Oshaya asked him, and he probably, and now the question you might say is, why did he come and ask him anything? And it's because I was reading this beautiful book about this, and it talks about because he was probably wearing the robes of a person, of one of the rabbis at these great yeshivas far away. And
Shia didn't recognize that this was his father.
no, neither recognized either.
But recognized that he was
Some important
an
student.
important
Yes.
teacher or something.
Yes, exactly correct.
So, yeah.
Wow, it's like a person walks into a bar and he's wearing a Ravens jersey, and you're like, wait, you've played for the Ravens? Right? It's like, oh wow, it's pretty impressive. He's wearing a jersey which says I'm a scholar. Rabbi Oshaya asked him questions about halakha, and Rabbi Chama saw that the halachot of Rabbi Oshaya were incisive. He's like asking him questions, and he realizes as he's asking him questions, he's like, wow, this kid's impressive, right? Rabbi Chama was distressed and said, if I had been here and had taught my son, I would have had a child like this. If only I could have a child like this, right? Meaning but instead, I did what I wanted to do, and I went off and studied at one of the yeshivas over here, and I missed out on my child's entire life growing up. So it's like really sad because he's realizing that
But maybe he has a son like that because he went away.
Maybe it's funny, possible. But what's also interesting is that and again, the only reason why I think about this is just because it's just the whole package in this one book that I was reading, which I kind of have a lot of respect for the author. But he went and studied for 12 years, but it's not like he had any disciples. No one's following him back. He's just coming. He left his hometown and went out to the schoolhouses in Lod or in Bnei Barak because he felt like that his little town that he was in wasn't big enough to handle what he could offer. But then he found out when he went to those places that he wasn't really big enough to be what they ultimately wanted him to be either. And so they kind of said, all right, let's both agree, let's part. 12 years, why don't you go home already? He's like, okay, I'm going home. And he went home, right? Not with nothing with knowledge for sure, but nothing like extraordinary that made him building schoolhouses or anything like that. So it's a sad tale because not only did he miss out on raising his own kid, but also it's not like he got anything because of it. Like that was a worthy trade-off. So Rabbi Chama went into his house. Now, presumably, so message gets to his wife that he's there. She's not going to drop dead. Rabbi Chama went into his house, and his son went in with him. Now, remember, he doesn't know who he is, and so he's probably thinking to himself, "Wow, this guy really is just so needy to ask me questions." Clearly, this little town here, wasn't able to satisfy him, and so that must be why he's following me all the way to my house. So Rabbi Hama stood,
Presumably, Rabbi Hama had not been home yet.
no,
It was the first time he's going to his house.
his own house, correct. So Hama then stood up before him to honor a Torah scholar, right? So he's just like, wow, this guy follows me in, and now he comes into my house. I'm standing up out of respect for this Torah scholar because he's young, but he really knows what he's talking about. Since he thought that he wanted to, yeah, because that's what I remember I say. He thought that he wanted to ask him a matter of halakha. He stood up in front of him because he thought they were going to be engaging again in another law. His wife said to him, "Is there a father who stands up before his son?"
And then he
Yeah.
His wife's
So-
there.
yeah.
So, in other words, what do we learn from this? About everything that I was sharing with you about Hama and just the mediocrity. It's probably the best way to describe it. The mediocrity. He's not an idiot. He's not like a fool or buffoon. He's just not anyone who is.
He's not brilliant.
No, but his son is.
Yeah, he's the distinguished and the great.
Yeah, but his son is.
Yeah.
And so now, remember before when I was telling you about like who did he say, who did he ask, I'm surprised you didn't say what my father was interested in. Instead you went to what his student was. Well, now we're learning that clearly his method is not to show necessarily deference to the father, but rather to the teacher. And he's now seeing that maybe come back at him a little bit. Right? It's like, so the next part is about just Oshaya. And it says, the Gemara relates, Rabbi Hoshai, again, same person, would regularly study before Bar Kapara. We learned about him a couple weeks ago. He then left him and came to study before Rabbi Chia. One day, Rabbi Hoshai encountered Bar Kapara and raised a dilemma before him. So up to this point, so what we learned from this is Bar Kapara and Chia, these are kind of like the last generation of the Tanaim, as we were just talking about. So that's kind of showing that he's just kind of like stuck in the middle of the generations. But he says, but it also shows that he has two teachers. He kind of transferred from Anne Arundel Community College and then went on to the University of Maryland. And although that's not fair, because Bar Kapara was a very worthy intellect himself and a teacher himself. Chia was probably stronger, to be sure, but they were both good. So I don't mean to suggest Anne Arundel to Maryland. Maybe I should have said Towson to Maryland, or maybe something like that. In any event, point is that Oshaya is now confronted by his former teacher, right? So it's awkward, right? Can you imagine? It's like he was kind of hoping that if he looked down and they passed each other, then they wouldn't notice each other. But one day Hoshai encountered Bar Kapara, and what did he do? So instead of addressing the awkwardness of the situation, like, sorry that I left your school and went somewhere else, but instead he just offers him a question, a dilemma. Now, I will admit that I just took it out, and the reason why I took it out, I just didn't include it here, was just because I didn't want to get bogged down in it. It was just because it wasn't the point was to get bogged down in what it said. Rather, I wanted to kind of then finish it up, which is how it ends, which is Bar Kapara said to Rabbi Hoshaya, "What does the Babylonian say about this matter?"
Is that used as a pejorative?
Yes. Yes.
A litvak,
Yes.
Uncle Max.
Yes.
a litvak.
Yes. What's the Babylonian have to say about it? That guy who you're studying with now, because he came from Babylonia, now lives in Israel, but came from Babylonia. But it's like, so it is totally a pejorative, right? And Rabbi Hoshaya was silent, did not say anything. Bar Kapara said to him, "Do we require the statement of Iya?" He even mispronounces his name intentionally to insult him. What? So, I just thought it was, I gave you this one just to say that he was a student of these two, but I love the story just because it speaks to the fact that these rabbis can be petty and resentful and insulting.
I was going to say, I grew up in believing that rabbis were up on a pedestal. And here we find out back in the day, they weren't.
No,
They were fighting.
right? I mean, that's about as petty. That's it's bullying, it's name calling. What did the Babylonian, what did Ea say? He doesn't even can't pronounce his name correctly. It's fun.
It's even before social media.
That's right. Now, so the next one is back to, we're going to get his father again, and we're even going to get his grandfather. It was stated that there is a dispute with regard to this issue. As Rabbi Oshaya says, the owner of the courtyard can prevent the owner of the roof from sealing the pipe, while Rabbi Hama, Rabbi Oshaya's father, says he cannot prevent it. So allow me to help kind of break this down for you. So we're talking about a situation in which there is like a gutter or a spout on a person's roof. And the gutter or the spout or whatever, the pipe is pouring rainwater, which collects into someone else's yard. And that rainwater is benefiting the next door neighbor. It's watering his garden, right? And the question is, now that it's been happening for however long it's been happening, let's say a year or two or whatever, if the owner of the gutter or pipe says, you know what, I'm moving it. I'm going to use it to water my own garden with, or I don't. It's weighing down my roof, and I don't like it weighing down my roof. I'm just sealing this off. That whatever the reason is, if he wants to seal it off, and the question is, can he do it? And what Oshaya says is that the owner of the next door neighbor can indeed prevent. He can now say, no, you've been watering this has been how this has been part of my house now, the water coming into my yard this way, and I can actually prevent you from closing it or moving it or whatever. Whereas his father, Chama, says you can't stop the owner from doing it. Does that kind of make sense what I'm talking about? Okay, so Rabbi Oshaya went and asked Rabbi Chama's father, who is also his grandfather, who is Bissa, Rabbi Bissa. Now, is Bissa is he one of the great luminaries? No, but he is more than mediocre, is what I would describe. I would just, he's more learned than his son Chama. But neither of them will even come close to kind of the reputation of Oshaya himself. The grandson will be the greatest of them all, but Bissa is probably better than Chama. But anyway, but the point is, his father and son are disagreeing, and they're going to grandfather to settle this dispute. Rabbi Bissa said to them, he can prevent it. In other words, Rabbi Bissa goes with his grandson and not his son. Rami Bar Chama read the verse about him. And if a man prevail against him that is alone, two shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. They're just taking a verse from Ecclesiastes, the expression a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Ecclesiastes is referring to literally when you have a piece of rope, like you can tear a piece of string, but the more pieces of string that you put together, the harder it is to tear it. And, a threefold cord is not quickly broken. In other words, these three generations are really something special, but in fact, it's just Oshaya who's special, but saying that this applies to Oshaya, son of Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Bissa, three generations of Torah scholars in one family who knew one another and conversed with each other with regard to matters of halakha, whatever. But the point is I was just kind of showing you that, like this whole time about father going away and studying for 12 years and missing out on his whole kids growing up, about how father Chama went and kind of was quicker to see what Judah Hanasi thought about something than what the teacher of Judah Hanasi, that he kind of picked teacher over parent. It's all kind of coming back to Chama a little bit here, and yeah. But it's also, there's kind of a sadness because it's like you can imagine what it was like for Chama to kind of see when his own father kind of said, no, your son is much smarter than you are in this. It's like, wow, powerful. So let's see. I thought I had two. Wait.
There's 2 more pages.
Yeah, all right. See if I
There's
got
a
it.
bad
Can I
one.
ask a
Oh, here it
question?
is. Yeah.
It's a question of family, and it bothers me that this rabbi went away for 12 years.
Right.
Left behind his
I
family
know.
to study,
Yeah,
and didn't become a great
I know.
rabbi.
Right. There, and by the
then
way,
he comes back and has remorse that he didn't have
right.
the opportunity to raise a son like.
No, or he's also having remorse for having gone away for 12 years.
Yeah.
He's regretting his decision because it didn't bear the fruit that he thought it would.
But it seems
He went to
though-
graduate school. He went and got a PhD. He studied in all this and for 20 years he's sitting there studying and studying and studying, and finally now he's a doctor, but he can't get a job.
But it's
so
different.
selfish.
It's very.
so-
I agree. It's very
Selfish.
I
very
think it
selfish.
seems different
And
to
why do we
me.
revere men who behave that way?
Well, wait, hold on. I know you want to say something, and let me just say
It's-
this.
it's
For what it's
ego.
worth, there are 3 stories in a row. That one was preceded by the story of Hachinai, in which his wife drops dead, which is preceded also by a story about this guy Rechumi, in which he basically keeps his wife waiting and dies before he ever comes home. And all 3 of these stories are tales in which the Talmud is saying, no, it's terrible what they did. And the only one who it doesn't really go off and say it's terrible, even though I still think it was terrible, was Akiva, because that one was the case of his wife saying, no, go. But he became so insistent on saying, fine, she wants me to go, then I'm going to go. And he also could have done a better job of being a husband and a father. But that's the only one. Akiva is maybe the one example in which the Talmud celebrates that type of length of learning. Everyone else, it doesn't. So the Talmud is not celebrating it. In fact, it's specifically, it's
I'm glad to hear
calling
that
out
you
the-
said
it's
that.
calling it out, and it's showing off that it's like, shame on you. And look, this guy, your son, by the way, who had to learn from somebody else, not you,
'Cause that doesn't-
ended up becoming truly the scholar. Maybe what it is celebrating is, thank God you left, so your son could learn from someone better than you. I don't know if it's saying that, but it's kind of interesting. So, wait, you were about to say something. Sorry, Mark.
What I've gotten from our time is that this period, this rabbinic period, was the best thing that you could do was study
Yes.
Torah, and they all.
Unless you weren't worthy of it, unless you weren't able to really, like, yes, to
But
become.
nobody wants to admit that they're not. They
True.
all try,
True,
and
but
and
a
all
lot
think-
of them still worked and had families and studied, as opposed to some of them who just spent their full-time job being students. And
But our, like with the guy who was Akiva's wife's father,
right,
like all of them, the priority was to get people to study Torah.
it's true, right?
And
If
it was
it was like if you sponsored, that
Yeah.
was Kaba Silvua, who the father of Rachel,
Yeah.
the Akiva's wife, and he was like, when he found out that who she was actually married to, like he was like, wow, let me just
He
support
was
you for
originally
everything.
upset because the other guy was studying Torah, and
It's true.
Akiva wasn't. The best thing you could do, and it's interesting because like from that or you could call it a mispriority or whatever.
Yeah.
But we got all the basis for everything that we have.
Yeah, you're right. I think what you're saying, and I agree with, is that there is kind of like an ambivalence that the Talmud has towards this. On the one hand, you celebrate these scholars for being just that, scholars, and for devoting their life to these holy things. But at the same time, what they're also saying is, but there are limits. That you need to that there needs to be some degree of balance. You can't just be all in and ignore everything else, ignore your children, ignoring your wife. I mean, it's
The ultra-Orthodox today, the sect kind of Orthodox.
yeah,
my cousin Rhoda was saying that she was glad her granddaughters were marrying learner earners instead of
Learner
learners.
Right, that's exactly right. That
Because
means,
there are people
and-
that
and-
are still supportive.
and my
of it.
son, Sammy, who's living in Tel Aviv right now for his junior year abroad, he was telling me about about a new thing kind of emerging in Israel, which was a shock to me. It's kind of fascinating. He said it's called the blue shirts. What does this mean? So you've got the ultra orthodox in white shirts, and then there's also ultra orthodox in blue shirts. And the ultra orthodox in blue shirts are the ones who know that they need to have a job.
And the white shirts don't serve in the army.
Correct.
They're busy studying.
Correct.
The blue shirts do
Will serve in the army even though they're ultra orthodox. So no, it's kind of it's kind of like, and he said now people even say the blue shirts or the white shirts, and it kind of is we're not talking about the difference between modern Orthodox, of which there's
No,
tons in
it's
Israel, just because you wear a kippah, but pretty much you live like a normal human being, except you're keeping Shabbat and you've got a kippah on your head. No. We're talking about ultra Orthodox versus ultra Orthodox, but one set of, like if you go, for example, have you ever been to, in Manhattan, there's a store called B&H Video.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's amazing, right? So B&H Video is like on 32nd Street or something like that, and if you go to the website of B&H Video, it closes down on Shabbat. It is run by ultra-Orthodox Jews. Actually, when I went into the store recently, there's only a handful of ultra-Orthodox Jews working there because they're all in the back. But the point is, it used to be that they were all in the front, selling and doing the whole thing. But so my point is that it's like the blue shirts are the people working at B&H Video. Like they need a job, they need to earn money, they're doing all this kind of stuff. And they're still being ultra-Orthodox Jews. The white shirts are the ones who just say it's all about studying. And I think what the Talmud is, believe it or not, in my opinion, is kind of saying is be blue shirts.
Yeah, but it sounds like it.
Be ultra-Orthodox, and yet at the same time also recognize that there's a world out there.
That's kind of more on the practical level, but what we were talking about, be a student or a scholar versus being a good father and a husband and all that. I mean, I'm sure, I can't pull to mind specific examples, but I know even in the modern world, people that we highly regard
Have ignored their families.
from public work
Right.
are people who.
Anyone who has achieved high level of success in this world
Yeah.
probably did so by ignoring their
At the
families.
expense of their
For
family.
sure. For sure.
I think there's lots of us, including me,
Me too. I know you're about to say, and me too.
who if I had it to do over again, famous last words, would definitely spend more time with my family.
Of course, yeah, me too. But it's hard to, and jobs kind of pull you in different directions, and you just do the best that you can, and you try to make sure that at least you are communicating kind of the values that you want to communicate, and so in these cases, but it's like they specifically say 12 years, and a bunch of them are 12 years.
Without
because
coming home,
because
I didn't do that.
Right, because even the most kind of pious, even the ultra-Orthodox in the white shirts in Israel know they have an obligation to their spouses and an obligation to their kids. That doesn't mean, like, they know that look,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it's sexual obligation to their spouses, they have all this, they are obligated. And so they are home. They may be spending most of their day at the yeshiva, admittedly, but they come home every night. They're not sleeping at the yeshiva. And so I think
As he did for
12 years. And so I think that it's so strikingly wrong that it's
Not only that, but he went away for 12 years without communicating.
right. And in this
Yeah.
book that I was reading, it's Ruth Calderon. If you want a fun book, it's called A Bride for the Night. This one, I've told you about this one before. I love
Yeah.
Ruth Calderon, A Bride for the Night. It's beautiful. It actually is the book that got me hooked on this kind of stuff. And she kind of this was one of her texts and she describes about how
So
as he's walking home from the yeshiva, it's called A Bride for the Night, Ruth Calderon. as he's walking home. What it is just to tell you, to give you a heads up about it, is she has maybe 12 or 14 different texts, like what I'm giving you here. And but what she does is she gives the text, and then she gives about 2 pages in which she goes into beautiful detail about this text, and then she did another page or 2 about her impressions of it. It's just beautiful, and it's but so she as she was detailing the text, she talks about how as he was coming home, he realized maybe this wasn't as far as I thought it was. I could have come home more often and didn't. That kind of stuff. It's really interesting.
So if the Talmud spends a bit of time, or the Mishnah spends a bit of time decrying bad behavior, as far as
It's like bad behavior, like they're saying we don't support this, even though we know that you did this
but I
for
don't
good
remember them
reasons.
saying, there's a lot that we don't know anything about, but I don't remember hearing about a rabbi who was home every night and he personally cooked Shabbos dinner.
Well,
and
no, that's true, but there are. I mean, like
are there?
Eliezer, is his wife, Ima Shalom. They were like a lot of them were. I mean,
Yeah.
We talked
you're
about
right.
that last week.
The guy that was poor, and he worked for his living, and,
Yeah.
Right, Meir with his wife at Bruria. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
this beautiful relationship
Yeah.
until he
Okay.
pissed her off. But the point is that so there's a lot of that. There are stories about it, what I think is interesting is just that there's this. I think it's just kind of communicating the importance of moderation. Again, I could read to you some other. Again, Rehumi is this. It's like 3 sentences in which he is literally his wife. It's in which it says that he's away, but he comes home. It's Yom Kippur,
Mhm.
and there's not a thing about Rehumi that we know. Like there's nothing. This guy is literally a hang-arounder. In other words, and it even says that he was supposed to have gone, but he didn't even want to go. He just wanted to hang out, And so he went up on the roof and just kind of listened in. He should have been going home, and at the same time it's describing what he's doing. It also describes what his wife is doing, in which she's peering out the window, and the Talmud says that, saying, "Is that him? Is that him?" It says in the Talmud, and then it says no. And then the next scene it says, and then the roof collapsed and Rehumi dies. And it's like, poor woman, all she wanted to do was to see her husband on Yom Kippur or whatever, and he didn't even he was too much of a schmuck to even just come home one day.
But we say that, and it's obvious to us that he's a schmuck, but it seems like in the time, they were all regarding it highly.
See, what I'm saying is in this text, that they are not regarding it highly.
Yeah.
They are not. They are saying he was a schmuck. And they're saying that Ham was a schmuck, and they're saying that Hachinai was a schmuck, and in truth, they wanted to say Akiva was a schmuck, but they didn't. Because he was too great. Right. But they wanted to say he was a schmuck too. They're saying, don't do this. We're not saying don't study. We want you to study. We want you to dedicate yourself to study, but not at the expense of everything else.
We've studied. We've learned about the importance of being well-rounded.
Yeah, right. And
And
even if you're not
You mean
well-rounded,
the Talmud?
Yeah, when we first started studying, we read about how important it was
well,
to not just throw yourself in one direction.
perhaps I can't remember, but what I can say is that it's. I don't think the Talmud is saying here, and I don't think these stories are saying don't study. In fact, just the opposite. They're saying study, study, study.
Yeah.
I just think but they put all of these stories in a row, with the exception of Akiva. The Akiva narrative is somewhere else. But they put some of these 3 kind of nasty stories about being away for so long and not recognizing your kids and having your wife drop dead, because she was in shock. Like
Asking people why they're so ugly.
Right, well, that too. That was in a different part, but yeah. What I'm saying is, but they put these 3 in a row because they were saying one after the other. It's a sad story of people who weren't able to show moderation in doing what they needed to do, and they needed to be more well-rounded, more thoughtful, more careful about these things. What were you about to say, Mark?
In the Torah study, we were just talking about Moses, and he kind of did the same with his wife
Yeah, right, Moses who,
and his kids.
right, who basically,
Yeah.
he hadn't seen them barely, and then he ignores them when he sees Jethro.
Yeah, in chapter.
But whatever
2.
happened to his kids? Today,
Nothing.
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 They just disappeared.
Well, I think one of them actually, I think it was not converted, but just like didn't follow the laws of of the Torah, which is kind of fascinating. Chapter 2, what does it say?
Chapter 2, Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Judah Huns, he said, "Excellent is the study of Torah when combined with worldly occupation.
Oh, yeah.
For toil in them both keeps sin out of one's mind."
Yeah.
But
Again, that's just what one person said, but I
the study
agree.
of the Torah, which is not combined with worldly occupation, in the end, comes to be neglected and becomes the cause of sin.
Yeah.
Hoo-ha.
Hoo-ha. Again, that just means that Gamliel agreed with us about this, that you need to have balance. And again, I don't think they're referencing that when they gave us these stories. These stories are kind of in their own section
Yeah.
of sad tale of what happens when you let this stuff get out of hand.
No, it was-
Anyway, we can finish up with Oshaya next time, and which is, wait, are we meeting? It was next week is the board meeting, I think, though, so let me just double check.
We're not meeting again to the 27th, he said.
Correct. Next time we meet is the 27th. Thank you guys very much on Zoom. Yep.
Do you know if you're going to Cuba?
Right now, it looks like we're going to Cuba, unless the government or the airlines make a decision about that, then we're going.
Oh, there was something really ugly that happened today with him, with the president talking about Cuba. So that-
Our president?
Our
Okay,
president.
bye. Look, I mean, we'll see. No, because the Venezuelan kind of vice president, the one who said that it smells like Zionist conspiracy here. So that was kind of ugly. But I think that, look, I mean, we met with somebody from the tour company who said he was just down there and it's pretty much business as usual. Again, it's not, everything that we knew would be the case about Cuba is still the case. It's poor, constant energy, electricity disruptions, all that kind of stuff. But, he said there's no difference now than it was before.
I think that's true a lot of times with the media.
But he said, but also that this company is taking 2 trips before ours, and so therefore we'll have an opportunity to kind of talk with them and see how things go and when they come back. And if the government says you can't travel there, or if the airlines stop flying, then the decision's made for us. But look, unfortunately, what happened was that they've paid. Cuba is not kind of like, they basically pay out all this stuff ahead of time, and then they're like, we're never going to get our money back. And so they've paid out everything. And so the only way that we could get money from them is if there's insurance that, the tour operator has insurance on, and then they can pay us back because they would be able to recoup it in insurance claims. But, we'll see. But again, based on what they said, I feel like maybe it's going to be okay.